Chapter 471. Thank you all for coming and we hope you enjoyed the show. Doing her signature pose, Sophia waved at the crowd, causing them to cheer even more loudly. Unfortunately for them, it was already the end of the show and therefore giving them one last goodbye, Sophia quickly headed back to the changing rooms with her group. Upon entering the changing rooms, Sophia slumped down on her chair and let out a long and tired breath. "Oh, I'm tired. Tell me about." Slumping down on the chair next to her was Penelope, her other group member. Taking a wet towel, she covered her eyes with it and leaned her head back. "Ugh, my legs are hurting like crazy." "Same." Sophia replied in agreement. "But I'm used to it by now." Raising the towel on her face and uncovering her eyes, Penelope skeptically looked at her. "Stop pretending, I know that you're not tired at all. You are one of the star students at the lock. You don't need to be humble." Sophia merely smiled in response to Penelope's comment. She then added, "Just because I'm a student of the lock doesn't mean that I'm immune to tiredness." Yeah. Penelope completely dismissed her comment. Sophia shook her head when she saw this. In a way, what Penelope was correct. Thanks to her training at the lock, that she was now able to keep her stamina in check during her performances. She also wasn't wrong when she said that she was one of the star students at the lock, as she was in fact ranked in the top 50 in her year. An achievement that was quite considerable. "Say, I've always been meaning to ask." Putting the towel down, Penelope suddenly sat up straight and looked at Sophia. A frown appeared on her delicate face. "Is money still a problem? I know that the lock costs a lot of money, but if you spend your time with us, won't you fall behind the others in your year?" "It's fine." Bending down and taking a similar wet towel, Sophia covered her eyes. Feeling the cold towel on her face, Sophia smiled in pleasure. Money is not really a problem. This was a bit of a difficult topic for her. The main reason why she was an idol in the first place was because of her family's past situation. Although they lived comfortably, they weren't particularly rich. At least not to the point of being able to pay the lock's yearly tuition fee, which was incredibly expensive. Despite making 7 million per year herself, she was still unable to pay the whole tuition fee. Had it not been for her father, she probably wouldn't have been able to attend the lock. Thinking about her father, Sophia felt a mixture of different emotions. She couldn't quite explain what happened, but one day while she was still a trainee for her idol group, she came home to find that her tuition for the lock had already been paid in advance by him. Before she could confront him about the situation, she found out that he had gone on a long trip. A trip that lasted a whole 2 years. During that time, Sophia panicked a lot as she thought that in order to pay for her tuition fees, her father had decided to undertake some extremely dangerous job, and only recently did she finally receive a call from him. Though relieved, she was still very angry at him. How could he just leave her like that? Without any explanations, and making her worried sick for the past 2 years? Unknowingly, Sophia's teeth clenched and she secretly swore to herself. "He said that he's coming to visit me today. When he comes, I'll let him have a piece of me." "Hey Sophia, what did you think about the girl you brought on stage today? Wasn't she just adorable?" It was then that she suddenly heard Penelope's excited voice. Raising the towel in her head, she found Penelope's face a couple of inches away from her. Sophia quickly moved her back. "Wow, move back a little. Don't be like that, Sophia. Here, have a look." Taking out her phone, Penelope showed Sophia an image of the girl that they had taken to the stage. Staring at the photo, Penelope squealed in delight. "Come on, you can't tell me that's not cute." Staring at the photo, Sophia nodded her head. Sure. She couldn't deny it. The girl was indeed quite cute. It was then that the other group members huddled up together and stared at the image of the little girl on Penelope's phone. "Oh, isn't that the girl from today's performance? I didn't get to see because of all the lights, but she's quite the cute one, huh? Oh my, how cute. Just look at her cheeks." Instantly, a cheerful atmosphere pervaded over the room. "Hey Sophia, why don't you look excited? You perhaps thinking of a boy?" Out of nowhere, one of the group members suddenly teased. Glancing at the girl, Sophia bluntly replied. "As if. There she is, the Ice Queen is back," Penelope commented from the side as she lowered her phone. Her lips curled into a smirk. "Say, is there really no one you are interested in, Sophia? With your looks and popularity, I don't doubt the fact that you will be able to find a boyfriend easily." "No thank you," Sophia quickly rejected. She then added, "I don't have time for things like that. It wasn't that she didn't want a boyfriend, however, she just didn't have the time for one. Setting aside her idle activities, she had to focus on her academy work. She barely had any free time for herself, let alone a boyfriend. And, well, none of them are as good as him, Sophia muttered inside of her mind with a longing look on her face. Actually, there was one guy that come to her mind when she thought about love, however, he was not someone that someone like her could reach. He was someone that shone on a brighter and more important stage than she had ever performed in. From the moment she had set her sight on him, Sophia found all of the boys near her dull and boring. It's too bad that he's not someone I can reach. Unfortunately, he was not someone that she could casually talk to. Despite her idol status, their achievements were worlds apart from each other. The only thing she could do was focus on herself and maybe hope that one day she could reach for him. We're almost there, Leopold. Patting Leopold in the back, I urged him to continue forward. At the moment we were currently headed backstage to meet Leopold's daughter, Sophia Ray, and the group leader of the idol group. This revelation was a pleasant surprise since I could use this as an excuse to help Nola meet them and take photos with them. How convenient, I thought. However, there was one slight problem. What are you so nervous about? Boss, give me a moment. And that problem was none other than Leopold, who looked extremely nervous at the prospect of meeting his own daughter. This was understandable though. He had not met her for almost 2 years. I'd also be nervous if I were in his shoes. Visit lworld.com for the best known to his experience. Click. Click. Just then I suddenly heard a familiar clicking sound. Stop that. To no surprise, I found Leopold hunched up trying to light up a cigarette. Dashing in his direction, I snatched the lighter and cigarette from his mouth and pointed at Nola, who was currently in Amanda's arms. There's a little girl over here, why in the world are you smoking? Oh come on boss, you know that they aren't that bad. Leopold looked at me with a pleading look. Ignoring his pleas, I put the lighter and cigarette away. No means no, let's go. Haze. With a long and exaggerated sigh, I managed to drag Leopold all the way toward the changing room of Kimball. Along the way we were stopped multiple times by security, however, prior to coming here, the manager had given Leopold a special card that enabled him private access, and thus, we were able to get through without too much trouble. On second thought, I don't want to go in. The moment we arrived at the door, Leopold suddenly started to get cold feet. As if I'm going to let that stop me. Grabbing him by the back of his shirt, I proceeded to knock on the door. To talk. Leopold's body instantly stiffened and I finally let go of his shirt. This guy. Staring at him, I couldn't help but shake my head. Never before had I seen Leopold so nervous. Even when he was fighting against a horde of demons and Durgars, he didn't look that nervous. It was a weird sight, if I had to say. Click. It was only after a couple of seconds had passed that the door opened. Peeking from the side of the door was one of the members of the group. Evelyn was her name, if I didn't remember wrongly. Wasn't really sure. Yes. How may I help you? Hello there. Taking a step forward and flashing a brilliant smile, I patted Leopold's shoulder. This guy over here wants to meet his daughter. Once those words left my mouth, Evelyn's eyes lit up. You're Sophia's father. Swinging the door open, the insides of the changing room became visible for all of us to see. From there, we instantly found multiple eyes staring in our direction. They were the other members of the group. Father. Just then, a familiar voice sounded from the other side of the room. Leopold's already stiff body stiffened even more as he forced a smile. Sophia dear, it's been a while. It has indeed been a while. Sophia's icily said as she looked at Leopold with cold eyes. Well, that was at least how it looked on the surface. I could tell from a glance that she was merely putting up a front. She definitely looked relieved to see her father. Not that he could notice anything, since at the moment he was merely a shadow of his normal self. Before Leopold could say anything else, Sophia nudged her head in my direction. Who are those people behind you? Finally snapping out of it, Leopold turned to look in my direction. Grabbing me by the shoulders, he dragged me forward. Sophia dear, let me introduce you. This guy over here is my boss. Your boss. With a skeptical look on her face, I suddenly felt Sophia's gaze stare at me from top to bottom. This persisted for the next few seconds before she quickly lost interest in me. She then proceeded to look in Amanda's and Nola's direction. However, halfway through her sentence she suddenly stopped. What about T? Oh, isn't that the girl from before? It wasn't just her that noticed this, as all the other members also finally took notice of Nola, as their eyes instantly brightened up. It's really her. How cute. Look at her cheeks. They all instantly dashed in Nola's direction. Why? Initially, afraid that Nola would be startled by their sudden actions, I tried to say something. However, I quickly stopped the moment I found Nola giggling happily at them. Never mind. Actually, the one that seemed to be the most overwhelmed at the moment seemed to be Amanda. So, Mr. Boss, I would like to ask you a few questions. At that moment, I suddenly heard Sophia's voice coming from behind me. With her legs and arms crossed, she looked at me with a semi-cold look on her face. Yes. Please sit. She pointed at the seat opposite her. Sure. Smiling slightly, I did as she asked. To be honest, I understood where she was coming from. Out of nowhere, her father came back home with a lot of money and suddenly disappeared for a long time. Furthermore, he came back with a ton of money. Given his previous job and income, she would naturally be skeptical about what her father's job was. I would have been as well. Therefore, sitting down in my seat, I calmly smiled at her. Is there anything you would like to ask? Nodding her head, Sophia's brows knit tightly. Biting her lips, she asked. Can you please tell me how much my father owes you? Owes me? Taken aback, a strange look appeared on my face. Before I could reply, she continued. I may not have enough money now, but I swear I can pay you back in a couple of years and… Hold on. I quickly cut her off. I then looked at Leopold and said. I think there has been a misunderstanding here. Leopold doesn't owe me anything. Hearing my words, Sophia had an unconvinced look on her face. Is this true? She asked. Seeing how skeptical she was being, I let out a long sigh. I guess I have no choice but to introduce myself properly. I tapped my face, which soon morphed into that of my regular self. Then, lowering my hoodie, I extended my hand in her direction. Nice to meet you, my name is Reem. Midway through my introduction, Sophie's eyes opened widely as her mouth opened and closed repeatedly. What? Chapter 472. Unknowingly, Sophia's face started to become bright red. Are you okay? Noticing her slight change in demeanor, I tilted my head to the side. There was something about her behavior. It didn't seem like I was the only one who noticed this, as Leopold worriedly placed his hand on Sophia's forehead. Sophia dear, are you okay? Stop. Smacking Leopold's hand away, Sophia stuttered as she looked at me. It can't be. Hold on. Meeting her gaze, I suddenly had a strange thought inside of my mind. That can't be. I quickly shook my head, trying to deny such a thought. It just couldn't be. Or rather, I wanted to not believe in the thought. It was then that Sophia once again spoke up. Why, you're Rendover, right? As she spoke up, I managed to pick up a slight tremble in her voice. Letting out a small sigh, I nodded my head. It looks like my hunch was right. Yes, I am indeed him. Oh my God. Sophia's face instantly brightened up. Her face quickly snapped in Leopold's direction. Dad, why didn't you tell me that he was your boss? Huh? Turning his head, Leopold looked at me with a look that said, what is she on about? I shrugged my shoulders in response. Although I already had an idea, I really wanted to deny it. It was right then that Sophia suddenly lunged in my direction and grabbed both of my hands and said, I'm a huge fan. What? Finally, Leopold was able to understand what was happening. Turning his head, he looked at me with a betrayed and hurt look. His face then proceeded to contort. How is this my fault? I wanted to rebuke. However, before I even had the chance to do so, Sophia had already started speaking. I've watched and replayed all of your matches back at the conference, especially when you beat up that orc and that pretty boy. A word suddenly caught my interest. Raising my brow, I asked. Pretty boy. Yes, that Kevin guy. Although he looks pretty, he clearly was no match for you. All my friends say he's handsome, but honestly you are way better looking. Oh, and the way you forfeited was so cool. For a split moment I wanted to let her continue. Just the fact that she was praising me over Kevin made me like her instantly. However, knowing just how wrong the situation was, I quickly freed my hands and looked at Leopold. My hope was that he would try and stop his daughter, but his response wasn't really what I had expected. With his arms crossed and with his head lowered, he nodded his head. I have to agree with my daughter. You were pretty cool back there. Oi. Now it was my face's turn to contort. What in the world is he doing? This should be the bit where you are supposed to deny. Leopold shook his head. Boss, I'm an honest man. H. Not knowing how to react, I could only let out a sigh. Sophia's sudden outburst seemed to have caught the attention of the other people present, as I was quickly surrounded by all the idol members. Oh my god. I remember you. Kaya. It's him. Surrounded by the girls, I didn't know how to react as I looked in Amanda's direction in the hope of some help. However, all I was met with was a cold and apathetic look. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Was what her face seemed to say. Or at least what I assumed it said, as her expression was quite hard to read. Especially since she was currently wearing a skin mask. I had given it to her before because she simply attracted way too much attention due to her looks. This was also why during the time the camera was pointed in our direction, no one took notice of her. Had she not been wearing her mask, I could have guaranteed that all attention would have been drawn to her instead of Nola. Well, at least for a bit. In hindsight, bad move, because had it not been for the mask she would have never pulled her previous stunt. Mr. Dover. Wow. Suddenly finding Sophia's face near mine, I finally snapped out of my thoughts as I moved my head away from her a little. Sorry. Quickly apologizing, Sophia coughed. I read from reports that you were single and that you were only 20 years old. Turning her head slightly, she glanced in Nola's and Amanda's direction. That woman over there said that she was your daughter, but doesn't she look a little bit too old to be your daughter unless... The fact that Nola is our daughter is a lie. I cut her off before she could finish her sentence. The moment I said those words, Sophia's face quickly brightened up. However, picking this cue up, I quickly followed up by pointing in Amanda's direction. The fact that she is my girlfriend is not a lie. At the exact moment I said those words, I suddenly heard a weird sound come from behind me. Without needing to look, I could already imagine what face Amanda was making. However, this was something I had to do. This was not out of pettiness, but because I didn't want Leopold's daughter to fall in love with me. In short, I was using Amanda as my shield. Oh. With a short nod, Sophia turned to look in Amanda's direction. Tilting her head to the side, she smiled and asked, "Is that true?" Turning around, my eyes met with Amanda's. After staring at each other for a brief moment and seemingly understanding each other, Amanda simply took off her mask, revealing her features in front of everyone. Wow. So beautiful. Oh my god. I know her. She was also in the tournament. Instantly all of the girls from Kimball apart from Sophia looked at Amanda with amazement. Following this, they instantly gathered around her and tried to strike up a conversation with her. On a good note, I managed to get rid of all the attention away from me. On a bad note, it seemed that Sophia had still not given up on me as she looked at me with a skeptical look on her face. "Is she really your girlfriend?" she asked with her arms crossed. "Well, sort of." I nodded my head. "Sort of. Yeah, we started dating not too long ago. Our relationship is quite new." I knew exactly what she was going to try at the moment. If my guess wasn't wrong, she was probably going to say something along the lines of, "Prove it to me. Prove to me that you two are in a relationship." And then we would be forced to do something very uncomfortable. Sorry, but no thank you. This wasn't because I disliked Amanda or anything like that. To be honest, with everything that happened today, the idea that Amanda liked me became more prominent. However, even if that was true, I still was unsure about my feelings for her. I mean, sure, she was incredibly beautiful, kind, and more than anything else a calming person to stay with, but I had been too busy preoccupied with everything that had happened with the other entity. I was afraid that my emotions were fake. Simply put, I needed more time to figure things out. Squinting her eyes, Sophia looked at me with a skeptical look on her face. She was still unconvinced by my words. Smiling at her, I stood up from my seat and looked at Leopold. "Alright, it's getting late and Nola is getting sleepy. Guess it's time for us to go back. You stay and have fun with your daughter." I needed to get out of here before things became too messy. "Sure." Leopold nodded his head. Before I could turn around to the others, Leopold suddenly grabbed my shoulder. "Rin, wait up." "What is it?" I asked. "Well." Licking his lips and looking around the room, Leopold scratched the side of his cheek before eventually saying, "About the cigarettes, you two?" "Nope." I cut him off before he could finish his sentence. There was no way in hell I was going to give him his cigarettes back. He was simply way too addicted. Instead of thinking about cigarettes, think about spending time with your daughter. Tapping on my mask to change my face again, I grabbed Amanda's wrist and dragged her out of the place. Before leaving, I made sure to say goodbye to the others. Have a good day, really enjoyed your performance. Oh, and keep our appearance a secret. Click. Before they could even reply, I quickly closed the door behind me. Achi. Finally out of the mess, I let out a long and tired sigh and lowered my body. Glancing up to Amanda, I bitterly smiled. That was even more tiring than the show itself. I was met with no response. Amanda? Staring at Amanda and looking at her line of sight, I realized where the problem lay and quickly let go of her wrist. Sorry. I quickly apologized. No, it's okay. Shaking her head, she smiled and looked at Nola, who had her arms wrapped around her neck. A smile involuntarily appeared on my face when I saw this. Looks like she's tired. She looked quite adorable at the moment. Come here, Nola. Extending my hands, I tried to take Nola away from Amanda. However, she quickly refused and snuggled her head on Amanda's neck. No. It's fine. This _ content is taken from lworld.com. Amanda patted Nola's back. Let her be, I'm not uncomfortable. Are you sure? Yeah. Alright, I guess. Patting Nola's head, I scratched the back of my head and finally decided to head back home. Looking back, although this experience was quite tiring, in a way it was also quite a breath of fresh air. It wasn't too bad. A few hours later. The ride back home after the concert was a quiet one. With the both of them understandably tired, neither spoke too much alongside the ride. The moment they arrived at their apartments, Amanda quickly gave Nola back to Rin and bid each other goodbye before entering their apartments. Click. Opening the door to her apartment, to Amanda's surprise, she found that the lights were still on. Oh, you're back. Greeting her was her mother, who was currently sitting down on the sofa reading a book. I'm back. Taking off her shoes, Amanda greeted her mother back. How was the concert? Good. I see. Natasha nodded her head before closing the book in her hands. Turning her head and leaning her arm on the back of the sofa, she teasingly looked at Amanda. So, any progress with the boy? It was at that moment that Amanda's body stiffened. Like a robot, Amanda turned her head to look at her mother. Progress? Ha, Amanda, even if I have been missing since you were 5, don't think you can fool me. I know you like the boy. Covering her mouth with her mouth, Natasha laughed. With your looks, I don't see any problems with him falling for you. Hee hee. Right. Nodding her head, Amanda decided to ignore her mother before heading for her room. Wait, Amanda, where are you going? You still haven't told me up. Click. Shutting the door behind her, Amanda cut her mother off. The moment she closed the door, she instantly jumped on her bed and covered her face with her pillow, and her body rolled all over the bed. What have I done? Thinking back at what happened today, Amanda found her cheeks becoming warmer and warmer. She is our daughter. Recalling the embarrassing words she said in front of the thousands of people, Amanda couldn't help but clutch the bedsheets of her bed and swing her legs in the air. A muffled shout rang in the air. Fortunately for her, her shout was drowned by the pillow in front of her. This didn't persist for long, however, as a frown soon appeared on her face. Lifting her head, Amanda turned her body to face the ceiling of the room. Recalling the time when Rin was surrounded by the girls, unknowingly, Amanda's grip on the bedsheets tightened. She didn't really think too much back in the past because Rin tended to be low-key. However, now that his fight had been broadcasted throughout the whole human domain, everyone got to see how strong he was. Not only that, but Rin was actually quite handsome himself, and added with what he did during the tournament. Amanda suddenly sat up straight. Oh no. It was then and there that Amanda suddenly realized something. Is Rin more popular than I thought? Chapter 473. A maddening scribbling sound rang inside a dark room that was lit up by a pale yellow light coming from a small lamp sitting atop a large wooden desk. Sat behind the desk was a male with long dark hair and green eyes. He was none other than Connell Rhinestone, Aaron's father. His current state was a mess as his eyes bagged, his clothes were unkempt, and a heavy stench of alcohol permeated throughout the room. How fucking dare they? He muttered as his head slumped to the side of the table. Bang. Standing up, he banged the table with his fist. Fuckers. He began to shout. How dare they do this to my son? He is 876. What bullshit is this? As he screamed, his voice was filled with resentment. The reason for this was because of the actions that the Union had taken after his son's death. Instead of giving him his son's body back, the Union handed him to the monolith and proclaimed him to be the wanted criminal 876. The repercussions of such an announcement were extremely powerful, as not even a day after the announcement was made and huge protests began to parade beneath his guild as people started branding him and his guild members as villains, murderers, supporters of evil. Their image was completely tarnished, and the following day, many of the members proclaimed their resignation, and slowly one by one more and more members started to leave. Fuck. Connell rolled his head on the table as his fist once again smashed against the table. What sort of bullshit was this? My son was 876? Impossible. Connell had already read about 876. This was only natural after all. The bounty on his head was huge, and it had indeed interested him in the past. That being said, having read that, he knew exactly what it was impossible for Aaron to be 876. It was clear that the Union was trying to frame his son in order to protect the actual 876, which was none other than the kid Rendover. Connell would have been stupid to have not made that connection. Slumping back down on his chair, Connell powerlessly looked toward the glass window of his office. There he managed to catch sight of the beautiful city that shone brightly in the night. It was beautiful. Or that was at least how it used to look in the past. However, now that his son was gone, everything started to become duller for him. Aaron. A parent's worst nightmare was seeing their own son die before them. Especially when it was broadcasted throughout the whole human domain. Just recalling the image of his son being split into two, and his body laying down on the floor whilst everyone was cheering pained Connell's heart to no end. He couldn't understand it. Why did this have to happen to my son? Connell mumbled repeatedly as he leaned forward on his desk and grabbed onto his head with both hands. What did we do to deserve all of this? Gulp. Swallowing a mouthful of saliva, Connell's eyes suddenly snapped open. Hot HA. His breathing started to become more laborious and sweat tricked down the side of his face. Swallowing another mouthful of saliva, he leaned back and opened the drawer next to him. Upon opening the drawer, Connell took out a small piece of paper shrouded by a mysterious black hue. So you've made your mind. It was at the exact moment that he took out the paper that a raspy voice suddenly sounded from the other side of the room. Instead of being startled, Connell's eyes remained fixed on the paper in front of him. Tracing his eyes alongside the paper, he soon raised his head and his eyes paused on a black spectral figure in the corner of the room. His bright and red eyes shone in the darkness. "You're here," Connell said. "Coo coo coo." A raspy laugh suddenly resounded throughout the room as the spectral figure took a step forward, revealing the features of a black humanoid creature. Staring at the contract in Connell's hands, he asked, "How about it? Are you interested in signing the contract?" Connell didn't answer immediately. With his eyes still fixed on the creature before him, he opened his mouth and asked, "Why should I sign a contract with you? In terms of strength, you are only a count-ranked demon while I'm ranked. Wouldn't I gain more if I signed a contract with another more powerful demon?" "You could." Pacing around the room and sitting on the table, the black humanoid creature suddenly smiled. "Let me tell you a story." "A story?" Connell's brows knit. His voice suddenly deepened. "I don't have time for stories. But I'll bet you will want to hear this one." Ignoring Connell, the dark humanoid creature started to talk. "There was once a demon. A young demon. He was just like any other demon out there. Purposeless. Just invading other planets and corrupting the mana of that world into demonic energy." The demon suddenly licked his lips and leaned closer to Connell, who was staring at him with a serious look. As he leaned closer to Connell, the demon whispered, "As you know, in order to survive, we must conquer planets and convert the mana into demonic energy. It's the way we can feed ourselves." "Wah. Tata tata." Before Connell could speak, the demon placed his finger on his mouth and winked. "Let me finish my story." An intense pressure suddenly bore down on the room. The pressure came from Connell's body, however. The demon simply shrugged it off as he continued. "As I was saying, there was once this demon. He was young, and while he was a demon, just like any other demon out there, he simply conquered planets after planets just to ensure his survival. His existence was, how should I say it?" Placing his hand over his chin, a thoughtful look appeared on the demon's face as he crossed his legs. "Purposeless." Snapping his fingers, he looked at Connell. "Yeah, that's right. Purposeless. That is the best way I could describe his existence. Aside from conquering planets and surviving, we have no purpose. Because of the Demon King, we can't do anything we want. How should I say it for you humans to understand? It's like going to work 24 hours a day without a rest. Pausing, the demon once again licked his lips. Now, what do you think would happen if one day that demon got a purpose? Placing his hands on the desk, he leaned his face closer to Connell's. What if suddenly out of nowhere that demon got a purpose? Regardless of how big or small it was. What do you think would happen? You would try your best to do it. Connell instinctively answered before his body suddenly stiffened. Unknowingly, he had gotten swept by the demon's words. A smile appeared on the demon's face when he saw this. Correct. Moving away from the desk, the demon sat down on the chair opposite. Raising his hand, he stared at his long and pointy nails. Now, what if I were to tell you that I'm merely a pawn? A small piece of a bigger board at play? What would you do if you were in the same position as me? Lowering his hand, the room suddenly chilled as the demon's smile faded. His shift in demeanor sent chills down Connell's body. Why am I scared? He's clearly weaker than me. Connell thought as he secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Shifting his body back, Connell was just about to reply when the demon answered in an apathetic voice. You would obviously be the best fucking piece out there. His glare pierced right through Connell's eyes and the temperature dropped even more. A deadly silence permeated the room as Connell and the demon stared at each other. This persisted for a good demon before the demon smiled once again and leaned back on the chair. Sorry about that, I almost lost myself there. Waving his hand over his face, he fanned himself. Glancing at Connell from the corner of his eyes, the smile on his face deepened. You're probably wondering why I'm saying this to you, right? Without saying anything, Connell nodded his head. What if I told you that alongside me you were also one of the pieces? And what if I told you that what happened to your son was not a coincidence? What? Opening and closing his mouth, Connell looked at the demon in front of him with a lost look. His heart started to freeze. Not a coincidence? What are you talking about? He. The demon suddenly laughed. At the exact moment he laughed, Connell finally lost it and stood up. I've had enough of your crap, speak to me. Bang. Smacking his hand on the table, he glared at the demon in front of him. A tremendous hue suddenly sprang out from his body. Speak to me. What are you talking about? Ha. However, instead of an answer, he was met with even more laughter as the demon smacked the armrest of the chair repeatedly. You. Enraged, Connell raised his hand and a dagger suddenly appeared. He then raised it in the air, ready to slash down at any moment. Wait, hold on, stop. However, just as he was about to attack, the demon suddenly stopped and wiped the corner of his eyes. Licking his lips, he looked at Connell, who looked back at him and threatened. Speak or you will die. Rather than looking worried, the demon seemed even more relaxed as he leaned back on his chair. What is there to explain? Didn't I already say it before? What happened to your son was not a coincidence. The pressure exuding from Connell further intensified. Who? He shouted at the top of his lungs as a crazed look flashed across his face. Visit to lworld.com, discover_new novels. Tell me who is responsible for this. I can't. The demon shook his head. Then die. Connell suddenly slashed in the direction of the demon. Since he wasn't going to answer, he was better off dead. Bang. With a powerful blast, the entire area before him broke apart and dust rose in the air. Ha. Breathing heavily, Connell stared in the direction of where he had attacked. Although he had only used a small fraction of his strength, he was sure that he had killed the demon. After all, the strength gap between in rank was that big. However, just when he thought that he had managed to kill him, an amused voice sounded from the back. Oh my. Snapping his head in the direction of where the voice came from, to Connell's shock, he found the demon from before standing there with a transparent body. How? Connell muttered incredulously. He couldn't believe it. How could he still be alive? It was a nice attempt. Raising his hands in the air, the demon's spectral figure started to become less transparent before his figure once again returned to how it looked before. Before Connell could snap out of it and once again attack, the demon spoke. Don't bother trying to kill me. This is merely a projection. A semi-tangible one. Why do you think I was able to bypass your security unnoticed? It's because I'm here and yet not here at the same time. Patting down his body, the demon walked back to where the chair used to be. Lowering his head and seeing that it was no longer there, he made a troubled look. Well, look at what you've done. Now I can't even sit. Placing his hands over his hips, he let out a long sigh. After a while, shaking his head, he walked up to Connell and placed his hand over his shoulder. What happened to your son was very unfortunate. I am truly sorry for what happened, but... The demon's voice suddenly became colder. Some things just needed to be done. He was an important factor in growing a bigger piece of the board. He was an unfortunate expandable that needed to be used to push the game forward. He was also someone that needed to be used in order to create this exact scenario. A scenario in which the two of us meet. In a way, you can say that our meeting isn't exactly fate. Extending his hand and tapping onto the sheet of paper on the table, the demon kept pushing. You want to find out the real culprit behind your son's death? Do you not want to avenge your son's death? Stop speaking. Hearing the demon's words, Connell's had trouble breathing. Each and every one of his words sounded really enticing to him. But yet at the same time he knew that he would fall right into the demon's trap as soon as he agreed to his words. How will the world view you? Isn't Connell Rhinestone a coward who can't do anything because of the Union? Even if you do decide to take revenge and kill Kevin Voss and the Union, and the one that framed your son as 876, will that be enough now that you know that there was someone else controlling everything behind the scenes? Stop. Please stop speaking. He pleaded inside of his mind. However, the demon just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. Are you really just going to be satisfied knowing that the one responsible for destroying your life is still roaming out there, laughing and chatting with his friends, having a merry time? Thud. With a low thud, Connell suddenly kneeled on the ground. A deep twisted smile appeared on the demon's face once he saw this. Grabbing onto the paper, he waved it in front of Connell as he whispered in a soft voice. Sign this contract if you want to take revenge on the one that caused your life to be a mess. Chapter 474. Trying. Waking my groggy mind up was the sound of my phone ringing beside my bed. Without moving, I extended my hand and touched the side of the bed until my finger tapped onto the screen of the phone and the call went through. Who is it? I groggily asked. Rin, Jesus Christ. How much are you planning on sleeping? Small Snake's voice rang from the speaker of the phone. What time is it? Rather than checking for myself, I opted to ask Small Snake. It's 12 in the afternoon. Huh. Raising my head turned in the direction of my phone. Leaning toward my phone, I looked at the time. Wednesday, 12:38 p.m. Oh wow. Slumping back down on the bed, I stared at the ceiling of the room. I had slept quite a bit. Rin, are you even listening to me? Snapping me out of my thoughts was Small Snake's voice. I could feel hints of frustration in it. What is it? I lazily asked. Connell Rhinestone, the person that you've asked me to keep watch of, has gone missing. Oh. How come you don't sound surprised at all? Because I'm not. I replied in a flat and monotonous tone. Covering my eyes with my arm, I yawned. To be honest, I sort of expected this outcome from the very beginning. I mumbled in a low voice. Low enough for Small Snake to not hear. Did you say something? No. I shook my head. The reason why I had asked Small Snake to take a watch of Connell was because I wanted to get rid of him before he got too troublesome. However, the preparations needed to take care of someone of that caliber were not simple. I needed a lot of time, at least a couple of months, and that was something that I, unfortunately, did not have. Looks like some demon managed to strike. Given Connell's current state of mind, this was not surprising. The man watched his son die in front of the whole human domain, and instead of feeling anything for him, they all cheered for Kevin, treating him as some sort of hero. Not only that, after the deal that I made with Octavius, Aaron was framed as 876, and with all the stuff that the Union had put up, Aaron's guild naturally underwent turbulent times, falling into extremely chaotic times. Though I did not know exactly what happened, all I did know was the fact that his father was taking blows after blows. In just a couple of days, he watched as everything he built and worked hard for crumbled right in front of his eyes. Had I been in Aaron's father's shoes, I too would find my mentality start to wane. I wasn't the only one who had figured this out, as the Union also knew of this, and hence why they kept a close watch on him. The Union was not stupid to the point of thinking that just because he was rank he would not succumb to the temptations of the demons. If they actually thought of it that way, then there would have been no hope for humanity. Just because someone was strong didn't mean they were strong mentally. If strength was correlated to mentality, then why was Kevin's mentality still so weak mentally? Why were there so many strong figures with strength above rank in the monolith? With their strength, they shouldn't be able to succumb to their mental demons, right? Unfortunately, that was wrong. It was simply a naive way of thinking. Someone's mentality was not built over strength, but a true real struggle. And this was not something that Aaron's dad had, considering the fact that he had a similar upbringing to that of Aaron. A sheltered one. Fortunately, although some of the union's actions were questionable, they weren't arrogant to the point of thinking that someone like Connell would succumb to his demons. Now the real question was, Small Snake, do you have any idea on how he managed to avoid your sight in the unions? As far as I remembered, the union was keeping a very tight watch on him. Not only did Connell manage to escape from the union's watch, but Small Snake's as well. About this, actually, it looks like he had external help from somewhere. Also, the fact that a crack in the sky appeared made things a bit easier. I see. I had a sudden look of enlightenment. With the crack in the sky appearing, a lot of the focus was shifted away from Connell. That being said, they still kept a tight watch on him. Most likely this was the monolith's doing. Alright, I think I already have enough information to somewhat make a conclusion about what happened. I'll call you later, Small Snake. Turning my body, I quickly turned off the call. Sitting up straight on my bed, I let out another yawn and scratched my chest underneath my shirt. Standing up, I headed for the bathroom. Upon entering the bathroom, the first thing I did was stare at myself in the mirror. If I had to use 2 words to describe how I looked at the moment, then it would be a mess. My hair was all over the place and I could even see some residual drool on the side of my cheek. Let's just say it wasn't really the most pleasant of sights. Splash. Splash. Turning on the tap, I washed my face. As I did so, I couldn't help but think back on the topic of Connell. To be honest, there was something about the situation that bugged me. If I looked back on the past, from the fact that I didn't eliminate Aaron back at the dome to the Emma incident which resulted in Kevin publicly killing Aaron, everything was linked together. I mean, was the Emma incident truly only just there for the sake of hurting Kevin's mentality, or was there something deeper at play? If there was one connecting factor between all of these events, then it would be the other entity inside of my body. He was the driving factor between all of those events. Once I realized this, the gears of my mind started to quickly turn. This may be a far-fetched theory, but what if this was all planned by him from the very beginning? What if, aside from doing what he did to me, his other goal is to make Aaron's father a part of his plans? That would make sense. Given Aaron's father's strength, he would without a doubt be a formidable asset to use. It would be stupid of him to not take advantage of the situation. Then, if this hypothesis is true, the demon in question could be Everblood. I had already come to a conclusion a while back that Everblood somehow had a link with the other entity inside of my mind. Therefore, I had no trouble linking him with Aaron's father. Full understanding on the lworld.com platform. Although quite far-fetched, I believe that this sequence of events is part of some intricate plan that the other entity planned beforehand. Since I found Matthew at the monolith back when I was there, it is safe to assume that Everblood also has a link there. And with the fact that the monolith may have had a hand in this, possibly, Everblood is indeed involved. Clack. Closing the tap, I leaned both of my arms by the side of the sink and deeply stared at the mirror before me. Therefore, if my hunch is not wrong at the moment, both Everblood and Connell are in the monolith. Honestly, I wasn't entirely too confident about this hypothesis, but this was definitely worth taking into consideration. I wasn't going to once again risk the idea of falling for the other entity's plan like before. Call me paranoid, but after everything that happened to me, I wasn't going to discard any little piece of information I had. Alright, it's way too early for me to think about all of this complicated stuff. Though I said that, it was in fact 12 in the afternoon. Ruffling my hair, I proceeded to take a quick shower. After that, I got changed and finally got out of my room. Oh, my Rin was like that? Yes, he was. Although he looks lazy, he actually is a very hard worker. Nearing the living room area, I heard a couple of familiar voices. Who's talking smack about me? Squinting my eyes, I turned toward the living room area. The moment I entered the living room, I was left surprised by who the person in the house was. Mississippi Longburn? It's Donna. Donna corrected before smiling at me. You're no longer my student, Ren. You don't have to call me Mississippi Longburn. Oh, right. I scratched the back of my head. I did it out of habit. It's all right. Tilting my head, I looked toward my mother before looking back at Donna. Are you here for? No, I'm here for you. Donna quickly cut me off before looking in my mother's direction. Taking the hint, my mother stood up with a smile on her face. Okay, I'll leave the two of you to discuss. I'll go back to the kitchen to make some lunch. Thank you. Donna thanked my mother with a grateful look on her face. Click. Soon the door closed and an awkward silence enveloped the room. Why don't you take a seat? The first one to break the silence was Donna, who looked at the seat opposite her. Yeah. Nodding my head, I did as she asked and sat down on the sofa. As I sat down, I stared at Donna. She looked exactly as she did in the past. Although only 3 short years had passed, during that time instead of looking older she looked even younger. Wearing a gray suit that perfectly outlined her body, Donna looked stunning. Crossing my legs, I met Donna's eyes and asked. So, what is it that you wanted to talk about? Pursing her lips, Donna sat up straight. Ren, I would like to ask you a favor. Before you say anything else, I want to say that you can refuse this request and that I will totally be fine with it. A favor. The moment I heard her words, my eyes sharpened a little. To be honest, I actually owed her and Monica quite a bit. For one, during the conference while I was negotiating with Octavius and my identity had been leaked, the two of them offered to leave the Elven domain to protect my parents till I came back. I also had to thank Douglas for that, as he was the one that allowed this to happen, as they were technically not supposed to leave. Not only that, I also owed them for the Mask of Dolos. The moment I revealed myself to the world and the mask appeared, the Union heads were able to make a small connection with the fact that it previously belonged to one of the criminals that Monica had captured. Had it not been for Monica vouching for me and putting on her job on the line, who knows, perhaps the Union would have forced me to give them the mask. What's the request? Crossing my arms, I calmly smiled at Donna. Although I couldn't make her any promises, I was willing to listen to what she had to ask. Thank you. With a grateful nod, Donna quickly cut to the point. Actually, ever since Douglas came back, we have been trying to find out all of the monolith spies that are in the academy. We have managed to pick up several, however, we are unable to ascertain for sure since there is no concrete evidence. They have hidden their roots quite deeply. Ah. Listening to her words, I was able to instantly get the gist of the situation. Now that the Union and the monolith were in a truce, if there was a better time to dig out spies it would be now, since they couldn't exactly retaliate. Given that the monolith was an organization that was many times more powerful than the Lock, the fact that there were a couple of spies or two wasn't strange. In fact, it would be weird for the monolith to not have any spies. We've already asked Kevin for help, and we just need someone else to help us enroll at the Lock as an assistant professor for just a couple of months. Because of your fame, we will obviously give you a new identity and everything. In the midst of my thoughts, Donna continued to speak. However, halfway through her talk, a certain word caught my interest. Wait, did you just say Kevin? Yes, he has also agreed to participate. Oh. I nodded my head. Things were starting to become a little bit more interesting. Still couldn't exactly say I was interested. Before I could say anything else, Donna added. By the way, before you misunderstand, although I am asking you as a favor, I'm not asking you to do this for free. After talking to Douglas, we have agreed that upon completing the mission he will give you access to the cube, the Lock's personal vault. Right then and there, my interest finally started to peak. Leaning my body forward, I asked. Will I be able to pick anything from there? Yes. Donna nodded her head. A smile soon appeared on her face. Douglas said that you can pick whatever you want if you manage to accomplish the mission. I see. Leaning forward and picking one of the cookies on the table, Donna took a small bite of it and asked. What do you say? Will you come back to the Lock for a bit? Chapter 475. Sitting cross-legged on the ground of my room, I thought back at Donna's proposal. We've already asked Kevin for help, and we just need someone else to help us enroll at the Lock as an assistant professor for just a couple of months. If I had to be honest, that was not a bad proposal. Not only would I be granted access to the cube, which was the Lock's special vault filled with skills and manuals, but I could also use the chance to recruit some talented people to my group. Furthermore, since the Monolith and the Union were still under a treaty, this was the perfect chance for me to consolidate my powers within the human domain. Not only that, but the Lock did have some of the best training facilities, so that was another plus. All right. Standing up from the ground, I stretched my body. Donna said that we can start as early as by next week, So I should use this chance to break through, rank? Touching my face, I shook my head. I really need to break through. I couldn't stand the thought of still not having hair on my face. This was especially so since I wasn't planning on going to the lock undercover. Although Donna did offer me to go there undercover since she knew that I disliked attention, I in fact already had an idea of who some of the spies in the lock were. There was no need for me to hide. Furthermore, it was going to help me save a lot of trouble more than anything else. The place was filled with a bunch of arrogant teenagers filled with hormones. If I decided to go there undercover, I would without a doubt be put in a scenario where they would constantly challenge me out of nowhere. And if I went there as my regular self, Rindover, the number of challenges I would receive would be close to zero. After all, no one would be dumb enough to challenge someone who was rank and beat up an orc half to death in front of the whole world. At the same time in another room. So you're saying that you won't be available for the next couple of months? Pacing around the room, a frown emerged on Kevin's face. At the moment he was currently on a call with Emma. Yes. I will be undergoing training with my dad during that time, so I won't be able to contact you for a bit. Unconvinced, the frown on Kevin's face deepened. However, it eventually receded. Knowing just how stubborn Emma could be at times, he knew that he couldn't change her mind. All right, I won't try to convince you otherwise. This is your life and it's not something I can control. I just hope that you remain safe. Don't worry, Kevin. Emma reassured. Don't forget that my dad will be with me. I won't go through any danger. If you say so. Hearing her words, Kevin did feel a little bit more relieved. He was right. Her father was someone whose strength was around to rank. There was no way someone like him couldn't ensure her safety. Perhaps he was overthinking. All right, Kevin, I have to go now. I will see you in a bit. See you. Kevin bid Emma goodbye. Do a repetitive beeping sound echoed in Kevin's ears, signaling to him that Emma had hung up the call. Lowering his hand and putting the phone away, Kevin sat down on a chair nearby and closed his eyes. System. He muttered out loud, prompting a virtual interface to appear in front of him. Once the interface appeared in front of him, Kevin swiped his hand toward the right and skimmed to the quest section. Quest. Information. Stop the Demon King from consuming this planet. Location. Cassaria. Goal. Stop the demon corruption of the planet. Rank. Plus. Requirement for transportation. Ranked core. Total people 3. Reward. Demon King Ascension plus 1 year. Minor realm rank up. Synchronization plus 15%. Penalty. Demon King Ascension 1 year. His eyes soon paused on a certain quest. The quest was something new. It was something that had appeared at the exact moment when the crack in the sky appeared, and he got the message telling him that the Demon King was ascending over the next 5 years. At first he was shaken by the revelation, however he was able to quickly calm down and think things through. Since the message appeared the exact moment the crack in the sky appeared, he was fairly certain of the fact that the situation had to do with the Demon King. Although he wasn't exactly sure about why exactly it happened, he knew that what was happening was definitely linked with the quest he got. Perhaps once he completed the quest he would finally know what exactly was happening to Earth and come up with countermeasures for it. Tucking his hand underneath his chin, Kevin muttered in thought. So I can bring 2 other people with me? Without needing to think much, Kevin already had an idea of who one of the people he would bring was. It was Ren. Who else but him? He was someone that already knew his secret. The secret about his system and the fact that he could travel through different planets. Furthermore, he was quite adept in these types of situations, and so, to Kevin, he was the most logical person to bring. But what about the other person? Crossing his arms, Kevin fell into thought. However, regardless of how much he tried to think, he couldn't think of anyone else to bring. Trying. It was then that his phone suddenly rang. Turning his head and glancing at the phone, Kevin found it to be Donna. He immediately picked it up. Hello. A week later. Monday 6 a.m. Staring at the mirror and moving my hand across my head, which was now filled with hair thanks to the aid of a potion, I let out a satisfied, almost proud smile. Much better. Without constantly wearing the mask, my face felt a lot less stuffy. Having broken through to rank the past week, my hair could grow back again, and thus I immediately took a hair growth potion before heading to the barber to cut my hair, which had regrown. Ren, are you ready? You are going to be late. It was at that moment that I heard my mother's voice coming from the other end of the living room. Taking another look at myself in the mirror and fixing my black t-shirt and tie, I shouted. Coming. Just as I was about to leave, I grabbed onto a pair of black thin-framed glasses and put them on. Today was the day I was finally going to go back to the lock as a professor, and thus wanted to look presentable. Although I wasn't wearing a suit, I thought that this was enough. "Oh my, look at how handsome my boy became," my mother exclaimed the moment she saw me. Following this, she dashed in my direction and patted my body from waist to shoulders. "Just look at how muscular you have become. Oh dear, this is not good." My mother's face suddenly became serious. Noticing this, my brows knit. "What's wrong?" "Well," placing her hand underneath her chin, my mother had a troubled look on her face. "What is it?" I asked with a bit of worry. Looking up at me, my mother sighed. "Ren, I'm just afraid that the girls you will be teaching will fall for you with how handsome you have become, and you are already 20. I don't want you to become a C." "Stop right there." I immediately cut my mother off. Placing both of my hands on her shoulders, I sighed. "Mom, let's not go there, okay?" "But..." "No buts. I'm not there to play around, I am there to do a job." Actually, that was a bit of a lie. Although I indeed had an important job to do, my main task was to observe people and see who to tempt into recruiting. "Well, all right. Okay." Giving my mother a quick hug before she could react, I immediately left the house and headed for the bottom floor. Clank. Just as I managed to get out of the house, I suddenly heard the sound of the door closing next to me. Turning my head, my eyes met with Amanda's. The moment our eyes met, Amanda's eyes looked up at me from top to bottom. "Going somewhere?" she asked, closing the door behind her. "Yup, I'm going to work," I replied back. "Work?" With a curious look, Amanda headed my way. Even though it was quite dark, from where I was standing I could see that she was currently wearing a nice black business outfit that matched her hair and eye color. In her right hand was a coffee cup. "Is it related to the mercenary group that you were talking about before?" Amanda asked as she took a sip of her coffee. She soon walked past me. "No." I shook my head as I followed Amanda and walked alongside her. "I'm going to be working at the lock as an assistant professor for a while." Halting her footsteps, Amanda almost spilled her drink. "Wow, watch it." Fortunately, I was able to react in time and grabbed her cup. Before I could ask her if she was okay, her head snapped in my direction. "You are going back to the lock as an assistant professor?" Scratching the side of my neck, I slowly nodded my head. "Yeah." Because of how busy Amanda was, ever since the concert I wasn't able to see her that much. And that was despite the fact that we now lived a couple of apartments apart. Amanda's eyes squinted. "I see." Quickly recomposing herself, she wordlessly headed for the elevator. She looked to be in deep thought. Seeing the state that she was in, I lowered my head and glanced at the cup of coffee in my hand. I quickly took a sip before following her from behind. I kind of needed that. Arriving next to the elevator, I took another sip of the coffee before giving it back to Amanda. "Here." "Thanks." Distracted by her own thoughts, Amanda took the cup from my hand and took a sip. Ding. Soon the elevator arrived and the two of us got in. 7 a.m. I came in front of a familiar-looking building. I thought that it was going to be a lot more crowded since it was about this time when the students would go to class. However, the only person I saw at the entrance was Kevin. Wearing a more formal wear than me, Kevin rigidly stood next to the entrance of the campus. I should first greet everyone with a smile, then I should tell them what I practiced. Kevin stiffly mumbled to himself and then noticed me. His eyes instantly lit up. "Ren." I moved my head in acknowledgement. "Why is everything so quiet today?" "They are at an assembly. Douglas is making his first official speech ever since coming back." "Oh." Now everything was starting to make more sense. Glancing around the place, I asked, "So, what are we supposed to do now?" "We wait," Kevin answered. Turning his head and looking into the building, he followed up. "Donna said that she will pick us up soon, so all we can do is wait for her to be done with her stuff." "I see." I had no problem with this arrangement. Lifting my head up and staring at the enormous infrastructure before me, I felt a mixture of different emotions. The emotions were mostly positive, but there were also negative ones. Especially when I recalled certain events that changed my life, such as the time at the dome when I was brought back into the monolith and had to go through all of that. I let out a long breath. Let's hope that nothing annoying happened. Never mind, this sounds like I'm setting up a flag. Yeah. Wasn't going to fall for that one. Chapter 476. Sure, yes, okay, we're coming. Hanging up the phone, Kevin headed for the entrance of the academy. I followed him from behind. Glancing around the place, I curiously asked, "Where are we going now?" "Section B." Kevin answered before he turned his head to glance my way. "By the way, I forgot to compliment you about the glasses." "Oh, these." Raising my hand, I pushed my glasses up a little. "Wanted to look the part. Kind of cringe," says the guy who is wearing a suit. I bluntly replied while pushing my hair back. Actually, the reason why I was wearing the glasses wasn't actually because I wanted to look the part. Well, a small part was. However, the main reason was something else. Connected to the glasses was a small camera that Small Snake and Ryan could see through. From there, whenever I wanted to pick information about someone, they would quickly send me a brief overview of their information. It was kind of handy. "Wait, is that? It's them. It can't be." Along the way, some of the staff and students that were not in the auditorium managed to recognize us, as I could hear faint whispering coming from their direction. Some even went as far as taking out their phones and started taking pictures of us from the distance. I feigned ignorance to that. "We're here." Walking for the next 10 minutes, we soon stopped in front of a familiar rectangular infrastructure. Even after having seen the building countless times in the past, I couldn't help but be amazed by the sheer size of the structure. "Let's go." Waving his hand toward the guard, Kevin and I entered the building and soon made it all the way toward Donna's office, which was on the 5th floor of the structure. "To talk." Kevin knocked on the door and Donna's voice echoed soon after. "Come in. If you will excuse us." Click. "Welcome, you two." Upon entering the room, we were greeted by Donna, who sat behind her desk. Kevin was the first to greet her. "Hey. It's been a while, Donna." It's nice seeing you again, Kevin." "Did you have any trouble getting here?" "Not at all." "That's good." As the two were talking, I glanced around the place. It had been a while since I had been in Donna's office, and it still looked exactly as it did in the past. Small and comfy. Rin. Snapping me out of it, I suddenly felt someone tap me on the shoulder. It was Kevin. "What is it? Are you not paying attention at all? Visit lworld.com for a better reading experience." Kevin rolled his eyes before nudging his head in Donna's direction. "She's saying hit to you." Coming to a realization, I lowered my head and greeted Donna. "Ah yes, good to see you again." "It's good to see you too." Donna replied with a smile, not minding my rudeness. She then pressed her hand on the table and passed 2 papers in our direction. "I'll get straight to the point. I need you two to sign these." As Donna passed the papers, a stern look appeared on Kevin's face. "Mana contracts?" "That's right," Donna said as she placed 2 pens next to the papers. "This is the academy policy. Each professor, be it an assistant, staff, or regular professor, must sign a mana contract. This is for security reasons, I'm sure you know, right?" "I see." Convinced by Donna's argument, Kevin sat down on a brown leather chair opposite Donna's desk and picked up a pen. Just as he was about to sign, his hand came to a sudden pause. "Hold on, if you guys do this, how come the academy still gets infiltrated?" This was a valid question. If the academy made everyone sign mana contracts, how was it possible for people to infiltrate the academy? Well, I already knew the answer to that. With a helpless smile on her face, Donna leaned back in her chair. "This just tells you how deep-rooted the influence of the monolith is." Before she could follow up, I sat down next to Kevin and did a quick skim of the contract. Once I made sure that there was nothing I was against, I signed it and put the pen down. "Kevin, I'm sure you know this by now, but a mana contract is not exactly omnipotent. Mana contracts, although useful, weren't exactly without flaws. There were definitely ways for some people to escape its influence, although the method was actually extremely complex and it required massive amounts of resources. That and the fact that the user would find their lifespan shortening by a large degree due to the fact that their soul would get split in half in the process. In short, it was not something that could be done easily, and the fact that the monolith had managed to infiltrate the lock despite all of this went to show how big of an organization they were. "I guess you're right." Lowering his head, Kevin signed the paper and put the pen down. "I wasn't thinking straight. I barely signed more than one myself." He then passed the contract back to Donna. "Here you go." "Thank you." With a satisfied smile, Donna put the papers away. A hologram was then projected in the air. "All right, I will give you a brief rundown on who the individuals you should keep a close watch should be." A long list of professors began to show. From low-ranked professors to high-ranked ones. They all varied in gender, rank, and the level of suspicion that the lock had of them. So they are the individuals that the lock suspects of being part of the monolith. I thought as I stared at the projection. There were quite a few familiar faces amongst the list of professors, however I never really interacted with them much. Not to the point of being surprised by what I was seeing. Either way, after a quick skim I was in fact able to spot a couple of figures whom I knew were in fact spies. I quickly memorized their names and positions. They can be of use to me. Kevin, you will be a professor, while Rin, you will be an assistant professor. Just then, snapping me out of my thoughts were Donna's words. Kevin is a professor? Donna's lips curved upward, then nodded. Rin, you have not even finished your first year at the lock. Even if you do have the qualifications to be a professor given your strength, unlike Kevin, you don't have a degree. Oh. I moved my head a little. Actually, I was happy with this arrangement. Since I was an assistant professor, it could only mean that I had less work to do. Looks like you don't have any issues with the arrangement. Donna clapped her hands. Raising her hand, she once again turned her attention toward the holographic projection in front of her and started to brief Kevin and M on all the individuals we had to be careful of. Okay, now that you two know what your roles are, I will now start giving you details on the people on the list. 30 minutes later. I left after Donna gave me a proper rundown on the situation and what I was supposed to do in the next 2 months. To summarize everything, all I needed to do was stick close to one of the targets and be their assistant. Demon Hunter Guild. Young miss? Young miss. Snapping Amanda out of her thoughts was her assistant, Maxwell. With a worried look he asked, "Is everything all right, young miss?" "Yeah." Amanda replied in short. She then lowered her head and stared at the papers in front of her. What were we discussing? We were discussing the launch of the magic card system. We have currently mass-produced over a couple of millions of cards, and we're currently sold out in terms of pre-released booking. We're practically ready to launch them, however, what we need at the moment is confirmation to officially launch them. Ah, right. Flipping through her notes, Amanda's eyes squinted. After a bit of thought she replied, "Let's start releasing the cards to the market by next week. Amp up security during the time and make sure that nothing happens to the reserves. Make sure that nothing happens during the transition phase. We can't afford to have our cards robbed. Even if it costs a bit, use the money." "Understood." Maxwell replied with a nod. Closing the folder, Amanda looked up. "Is there anything else?" "No." Maxwell shook his head with a kind smile on his face. His reaction caused Amanda to tilt her head. "Is there something else you need from me?" No. Shaking his head, Maxwell took his folder back. Lowering his body, he bid Amanda goodbye before leaving the room. Click. Silence descended in the room once Maxwell left the room. Glancing at the door for a couple of seconds, Amanda grabbed her coffee and took a sip. After that, from the corner of her eyes, she glanced at her phone, which was resting by the side of the desk. Her eyes immediately squinted into slits. Extending her hand, she turned her phone over. At the exact moment she turned her phone over, displayed on it was the image of a girl taking a selfie with several people behind her. Wearing a cute fluffy hat and with her fingers crossed together in a heart shape, the bottom of the image had the captions that said, "Back at the lock. I'm so excited." You can find the rest of this content on the lworld.com platform. Further beneath it was a string of hashtags. Hashtag back here, hashtag awesome, hashtag lock, hashtag #1 academy. What followed the hashtags was a string of comments. 1,983,097 likes. Georgina Smith, "You look amazing, bae." Evelyn 1287. "Wah, I am so jealous." Connor, "Please marry me, queen." Manor 97_98. "Not only are you an idol but you are also a student in the lock? How perfect can someone get?" Tisk. Amanda subconsciously clicked her tongue. 30 minutes before the lecture started. "Good morning." Entering a small private room, I greeted the professor I was supposed to be assisting. Thomas Dietschel was what he was called. According to Donna, he was one of the people that they suspected of being one of the spies for the monolith. But as I entered the room, I was left surprised by the fact that there was no one present. Not only that, but the whole room was a mess. With papers covering the whole room, it was quite hard for me to even walk. "This place is a mess," I muttered to myself. "Oh, you're finally here." "Who?" Startling me, I suddenly heard someone's voice coming from somewhere around the room. "Over here." Once again hearing his voice, my eyes soon locked toward a certain location in the room. With the sound of paper falling to the side, a lanky male with a bowl cut and black-framed glasses groggily got up. Raising his hand to fix his glasses, he gazed in my direction. "You must be the assistant professor I was promised, right?" "Why, yeah," I replied with a forced smile. "Is this guy really a professor?" Thought to myself. He looked like a complete mess. Not only were his clothes wrinkled, but there was also a strange odor coming from him. Patting his body down and up, the professor turned to look at the clock by the side of the room. "Oh, it looks like class is starting soon." With a nonchalant loon on his face, he slowly stood up and stretched his body. Then reaching out for his desk and grabbing a small folder, he got out of the classroom. Speechless, I let out a long sigh. "H.A." He just went up and left without even introducing himself or telling me what I'm supposed to do. From this very moment, I already knew that my short stay here would not be as relaxed as I thought it was going to be. Slumping my shoulders, I followed the professor from behind. "Professor, wait up." Catching up to the professor, I found myself in front of a large wooden door with the words, "Being 09, engraved on the side. "Good that you're here." Before I could figure out what was going on, the professor looked at me and pointed toward the classroom. "Here's your first task as an assistant. Get everyone to stop talking